on this computer. There we go. I should have known because that little voice always pops up when I start recording. But all right. So today is the Black and Latinx collab. I'm gonna start us off and then I'll just be bouncing off of our two speakers' points. But for the topics today, we have, we have environmental racism and immigration. And for me, I'm going to be talking about imposter syndrome, which is something I just became aware of this year. And we just started talking about it in Black Student Union. So yeah, we can start off with that. So I'm going to give a definition of imposter syndrome so we all know what we're talking about. Why isn't it popping up? Oh, I see. I'm going to share my screen. And not that. We need this. Okay. So imposter syndrome, the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own effort or skills. That's the definition. And imposter syndrome disproportionately affects communities of color. So that's why I wanted to bring it up, because I felt that it would be good to compare for like the Latin voices we have on here to see how they feel about it, because it does affect like both of us. So a lot of the times communities of color feel like we don't deserve certain things, or like we were just given it. Like, I don't know, for example, we were just given it because we're a token or something like that. Like, you know, because a lot of the times people of color are used as like tokens. So we feel like it invalidates our successes and stuff like that. A lot of times we don't feel good enough, even when we're like, you know, doing everything that we can. Like for me personally, it affects me a lot. Like I feel a lot of the time, like I said, just like my accomplishments aren't enough. And it also, I think, makes communities of color have like a perfectionist mindset that can be harmful at times, where like we just feel like we have to be on point all the time. We have to be doing things better because we're a person of color. You know, we can't be as good as that white person. We have to be better than them to show that we're doing enough. And I think, I don't know if you guys want to speak up too, but I think this affects the Latin community as well, just because both of our communities have been marginalized throughout history for so long and just told that we're not good enough and that we're inferior. So it kind of like plants the seed in our head, I feel like, that we have to kind of overcome. So yeah, I just wanted to bring awareness to that, because it definitely is always going to be relevant and always going to be a battle for communities of color when it's embedded in our society that like we're inferior. Basically, we start to feel that way about ourselves, like we internalize certain things. So like to work through that, I feel like a good solution is just talking with people that feel the same way as you, honestly, like, and just reminding yourself that you are, you know, you are that bitch, because you are doing things 10 times harder and better than the person next to you, because you feel this way and you've been put down for so long, you know. Did anybody want to speak on that?
Yeah, I want to. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
You go.
Go ahead.
Fine.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say that. Sorry, my voice is kind of gone, but I was gonna say that with like imposter syndrome in like the Latino community, especially if your parents are like immigrants to America, I feel like it hits us almost a little harder when your parents are immigrants, because like you're trying to like make up for them because they probably didn't graduate with a degree and they didn't teach you anything that has to do with like college and shit like that. So like it's harder. I'm not saying it's harder or anything. I'm not trying to balance it, but as like a person who my dad was an immigrant here, like you definitely like always feel like you're trying to play catch up. But yeah.
Yeah, I have quite a few points on this, just because I'm going to be speaking from like the perspective of someone who attends a predominant, well, I wouldn't say if it's considered a predominantly white institution anymore, but like, for example, I do attend UW, and that is an incredibly large amount of students that I see every day. And only about like 10% are Latino. Like it's really a small percentage that attends there. And so I remember like my first day, like I didn't see anyone in my classes that looked like me. These were classes that were like 300 people lecture halls, and I didn't see anyone that looked like me. And so I never really experienced that in high school, because in high school, I feel like I saw a lot of people that looked like me. And it wasn't even just about looks either. It's just a set feeling, a sense of community. So I did have to reach out quite a bit to be even a part of these like clubs, just because I didn't know we had them, because there's not many of them. So like, for example, like I am on the pre-nursing route. So there's like a pre-med like club for Chicanos for community health. And that's like a very small people that attend every session. And then there's like, you know, like we have a Latino student union, but over COVID, like they didn't have that going. So it completely stopped. So people had to this year just started bringing it up again. So like that was one of the things that I felt like I struggled with a lot, because some of the comments, like I literally was told this before, that we were talking about how we got in and like what our stats were or something like that. And then someone said, like in a kind of, not in a like passive aggressive way, I want to say they didn't mean any like ill intention behind it, but I kind of took it that way. They were like, isn't it easier too if you're like Mexican, or like isn't it easier for you to get in because like UW really wants diversity, and like they pride themselves on how diverse their like community is. So that kind of like irked me kind of, because I was like, you know, I still had to get good grades. I still had to be incredibly involved. There were a lot of Latinos that I knew that didn't get in, it wasn't just that. And so I kind of felt like I kind of thought, well, is this what everyone thinks? Like, does everyone look at me and it's like, oh, you just got into this institution because you're a person of color. Like it was just it brought so many problems to the table. But that was one of the things that like I saw a lot going to such a large university, that like I just one, I didn't feel a sense of community, and two, when I did find people, like we all kind of thought the same things, like, oh, people are just saying we're here because that's what UW wants. And it has its, UW is problematic in that way, but it did provide some community to me, but it was difficult, to say the least.
Yes, thank you guys so much. And I can definitely relate to that. Just how I go to an all white hick town type of school. And yeah, it's like you really have to like advocate for yourself and like find like the right people, because a lot of the times they do invalidate, especially like in a predominantly white area. I feel like they just, I don't know, affirmative action, yes, it's a thing, but that doesn't like take away from how hard we did have to work either way. And like I said, a lot of times we are the ones working 10 times harder than everyone else just to like try and be equal, because conditions aren't actually equal. So yeah, I can definitely feel that. It's like a lot of the time, the invalidation of like others can like make you second guess yourself. And it sucks that you have to like I said, compensate for it by working hard and everything like that. Cause yeah, I've had experiences like that too, where they're like, oh, basically the same thing with affirmative action. You only got in here because you're a person of color and this and that. And I'm just like, I am a person of color, but I worked my ass off to get here. And like, it's hard to convince other people and yourself at the same time of that. So yeah, I can definitely feel that. Thank you guys for speaking on that. And Araceli, on your point, that's actually something I didn't even think about. So I thank you for bringing that to my attention. Like children of immigrant parents, for sure, I could see how it'd be even harder for like you guys, because you're not only trying to make up for how you feel as a person of color, but then your parents as well. So definitely, that's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up. But any other thoughts before we go to the first speaker?
Hey Ray, it's Brett. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. Totally interesting that you bring up imposter syndrome, because I have been training at my new job, And there's another girl, she's younger than me. I want to say she's like 30. And we were talking the other day because we had to do like these practice sessions, and she is half Mexican and half sorry, I accidentally muted myself. She said she's half Mexican and half Filipino. And so when we were talking about doing like our presentations and our run throughs and starting this new job, she was like, I feel like I'm like still dealing with imposter syndrome. And I thought it was about her age. And so it's interesting hearing you talk about this now, because it didn't even, because I just didn't even think about that. And so I just so grateful that you do those things, because I continue to learn and can think along, be more aware with those kinds of situations, because I'm sure I was partly off base with just thinking that it was just about her age. And I was like, you belong here. She's doing all these things. Great. Like, no, you are not an imposter. Like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. So thank you for doing this. And then also everybody else for sharing, because I'm learning and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I'm glad because, like I said, I feel like this isn't talked about enough. Honestly, I just learned about it this year. So, like, I think that could happen to anyone. Like, I had no clue, but it's something that definitely needs to have awareness brought to it because it affects so many people, but especially communities of color. But yeah, any other last thoughts or anything before we start? All right, then if not, we can start with our first speaker, Araceli, and she's going to be speaking on environmental racism.
Hi guys, I'm gonna share my oh wait, can I share my presentation, Rainy? It says I'm disabled from
Oh
participating.
my God. Yes, you can. Let me just figure out how to do that.
Okay.
I'm like an old person when it comes to technology, guys, so just bear with me. All right, did it work? Did I do something?
Let's see. Yep, it worked. Okay, cool. All right. So hold on, that's not my intro slide. So this is environmental racism, and I just wanted to bring up my notes are on my phone, but I wanted to bring up that our like in our specifically in our food system. So that means like not only like the agricultural workers and the people in the fields, but also just like grocery stores and everything that has to do with food. I wanted to bring up that our food system was just built on racism to begin with. Like as we all know, like slavery, like that was definitely racist, and that was how our food system was basically what it was built upon. So what is environmental racism? It's the disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on communities of color. And it usually occurs in communities that were once redlined. And if you're not familiar with redlining, it was basically like racist practices where they would kind of almost like push people of color into like cities and like areas and communities. And like it, it's almost like they were uh I don't know, we were just kind of pushed into these cities, and then they were turned into being called the ghettos, because people who lived there were just all people of color and like low income. And the problem with redlining is that these people who live in these ghettos or just low income areas, they never got out of the like poverty, and so they just never got to disperse. And like the racist practices from redlining like still happen today and impact us today. So how does it show up in our food system? It shows up with herbicide and pesticide pollution. So like if you guys know what herbicide and pesticides are, it's like used in agriculture, and it's basically chemicals and poisons for our food. But the thing is that these companies are being built in low income areas, and they're actually polluting a people like low income areas, and also communities of color. And like right here in this graphic, it shows that in like in a Latino community, it was 8 million pounds of pesticide were dumped in their grounds, compared to a white community where it was only like 700,000. And these chemicals like lead to breast cancer and all types of different illnesses. Hold on, it's not letting me go to the next slide. Okay, there we go. And it also, environmental racism shows up with nitrates in our drinking water. It's basically poison in our waters, and it leads to like more types of cancer, and it's impacting communities of color more than others. Lastly, this is an important one, is food apotheoses or food deserts is what they like to be called. And you can see this almost like everywhere that like it's in a low income or community of color area. There it basically looks like just fast food places on every corner, or maybe gas stations or small markets like that. But what you won't find in these areas are like grocery stores that serve healthy fresh foods. You might find a Walmart, but you won't find like a Whole Foods or any like top like high notch like grocery store. Some of you guys probably have witnessed this yourselves. The problem with this is that means that people of color in low income areas are not getting the healthy foods like white communities might be in other higher end communities. So it's basically kind of killing us, and it's not our fault. It's like the government's fault for not ensuring that we're getting grocery stores, and that this leads to like obesity and diabetes and all that stuff. So environmental justice, some ways that we can like help fight this is make sure that we're reaching out to our politicians and ensuring that we get some laws made. You can also shop locally, like if you have like a local grocery store, support your small businesses, and then also start your own garden and make sure that you know what you're feeding yourself and stuff like that. But yeah, that's it. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much. I was really excited for these points because obviously this is something that Black and Latinx community can relate to. A lot of the time we're literally, like she said, redlining happens. So we're placed in these like distinct communities, and then the only thing available to us is, like she said, like there's liquor stores, there's junk food and stuff like that. So it's just like, this is when we say it's systemic and it's embedded into our society. Her points just perfectly show that, because like she said, it's not our fault, it's not something we can control, but we're literally being poisoned. Why do we think that communities of color have the most have like diabetes and what else were you saying? Diabetes, obesity, these impact
Cancer.
Yeah, exactly, these impact communities of color more than others for a reason. It's like, it's just crazy, because when we talk about this type of stuff, the conversation of what's it called when we're supposed to get paid reparations, that the discussion of reparations comes to my mind, because it's just like people argue against reparations for communities of color, and I think it's ridiculous. Like, we still are facing problems because of the way that you guys like set us up in society. So I think reparations is more than fair. Like, we're literally below in society for things that we can't control, like, so I think, yeah, I'm just really glad that you brought this point up, because it definitely disproportionately affects both of our communities so much. And Rachel had something to add.
Okay, so it's kind of along the same line of agricultural and slavery. A few years ago, I took an English class and we talked a lot about slavery, like modern slavery. And my essay was talking about agricultural slavery. And so a lot of people from Mexico and other Latinx like countries from South America, they see a way to come to America and make money, like the American dream, until they get on like a truck to come over and they have all their papers and they're ready to go. They're legally allowed to be in America to work. And then they get trucked across, and the coyotes or whoever is helping them come across, they take their papers for safekeeping and sell people for $100 to farmers. And so like a lot of our agricultural foods, like our tomatoes and just all types of fruits and vegetables, are actually harvested by slaves who are forever stuck in a farm, even in Washington and in Texas and all these states that you wouldn't think to look twice, but you might be living right next door to a slave and you just don't know it. So that's just what I was really thinking about, because it's a lot more connected than we think. You know, it's like it goes a lot deeper, and just everything is connected. Like Arceli said, everything is connected to slavery, and it still affects us. There's more than like 20 million slaves or some enormous amount of number of slaves around the world that still exist today, and a lot of them are in America working on fields from so many different big companies. And that's just what I wanted to bring up.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Yeah, that's a really good point. Also, like, it's just like, this is why it surprises me when people are saying like there is no unequal situation. Like Black people have just as much opportunity. Latinx has just as much opportunity here in America. Anyone can do anything in America, right? Which, okay, we have opportunity, but we have an unlevel playing field. So it's like, there's definitely inequality embedded into our society. And it's hard to not feel like our government and the people that rule it's hard to feel like they want to see us win, basically, because it just, everything that happens seems like they're trying to keep us under for some reason. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for bringing those points up. Giselle?
Yeah, one of the points that Araceli mentioned where like some places like will be there won't be like any like, let's say, organic grocery stores or like a Trader Joe's or something like that, but you'll see like fast food places or like just things like that. Like I know like in Everett, if you go into specific communities, you're gonna see a whole bunch of fast food areas, specifically where there's low income residents. So I've noticed that like you'll see like your local like Walmart or something, but you won't see like a Trader Joe's until you go all the way up to like, I don't know if anyone's familiar with like the Everett area, but like you'll go up to Bothell and there'll be like so many farmers markets, so many places you can go to get healthy organic foods. And then another thing that I wanted to mention is, I don't think this has to do necessarily with agriculture, but the placement of stores. I know if you go to a low income, like it could be Fred Meyer, it could be Walmart, it could be wherever, they're gonna lock the formula and they're gonna lock the like just yeah, they'll lock formula and like other basic needs. But if you go more like where there's like a more like high income community, they don't lock those, which is completely like bullshit, because sorry, but like it's bullshit because there's a formula shortage going on and they're locking it. Like, and they're not locking it somewhere else where there's high income. So when someone already is like looking for formula, they already like are being like kind of like, there's this kind of like, they kind of have this like idea that they're gonna steal it. And then that's not the case. Like they're just trying to access food, and like that's not the problem, because you can ask someone to unlock it, but it's like the idea and the principle behind it. Like you're assuming they're gonna steal it when they're just trying to feed their child. But if you go somewhere else, that's not to say that someone's not going to rob that store. Like who's saying that the low income community is going to rob it, but not the high income community? Because I've seen like stores being robbed in high income communities. So that was my perspective on that.
Yes, I definitely agree. I'm glad you brought that point up too, because it's so true. Like this, like I said, once again, how do people not see this? Like it's up in our face a lot of the time, literally just out in the open. It feels like America is saying, fuck people of color, like out in the open. And I'm just like I said, a lot of the times it feels like we're going backwards. So it is frustrating. And it feels like things should have been done already. Like we're claiming to be such a progressive state, we're liberal, we care about democracy, we care about human rights. And yet there's still things from history that are impacting us today, keeping us at a lower position in society. So it's definitely frustrating, and I'm glad you guys brought up those points. It's something that irks my soul so bad, like I just can't. But Tatiana?
Yeah, going off of the stores and locking things up, like I've seen them lock up hair products before, which is so annoying because I'm a naturalist. I've been natural forever now, and I don't want to have to go ask. Like, I'm a whole grown woman. I do not want to have to go ask if I can get the Carol's Daughter detangler. Like, what the hell? And I don't steal. Like, I've never been a stealer. Like, I'm not like that. So just to assume that the people of color, it's only the people of color's hair products, the multicultural hair products. It's literally only that, but the Dove and the Tresemme and all this other stuff is just out and open. And it's blatant. It's so obvious. It's literally it. Like, how would no one think twice about that? Like, that's so irritating. And with the placement of stores, I don't know if it's necessarily in Washington. I'm trying to think of like North Everett, where it's kind of like weird, but I think I've seen a video of Chicago where they, like, in the lower income, they have liquor stores everywhere. Like, there's more liquor stores than there are just like a regular ass store. And I think that's also like a prominent thing too, because it's like they just want us to just go downhill. Like, if you really think we have the same playing field and we're all equal and we're all why are there so many liquor stores and not like libraries or a Walmart that has like more educational sections or just something that's actually helpful? Like, what the hell? Like, I get like, yeah, we all want to party on the weekend, but some of us have Monday through Friday jobs. Like, nobody's trying to, like, yeah, anyway.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, they don't want to see us win, but that just shows that they're trying to hold us from our full potential, because they know once we all actually reach our full potential, like, they're in trouble. That's why I wanted to do this collab, because I feel like the Latinx community and the Black community need to unite on a lot of these issues. Honestly, all communities of colors, but especially us too, because of the fact that we've been like marginalized so much through history. And like, I don't know, I always feel more, as soon as I see, like at my school, since it's like all white people, like I said, as soon as I even see like a Latinx person in my class, it just makes me feel like a sort of comfort, because I'm like, okay, there's someone here who understands my struggle somewhat, you know what I'm saying? Like, someone here who is gonna bring a different perspective to my freaking white ass class. And yeah, I'm just like, I think it's really important because of these things that we all like unite and we all remind ourselves of our potential. We all do the things that Araceli had put on her PowerPoint, like like talking to politicians, voting, all of that. It's especially important for us to do that. I know a goal of mine is like to move somewhere where there's like a lot of Black people, like for example, Louisiana, but it's a red state, because I truly believe that if all Black people voted, it would not be a red state, because look what happened to Georgia. Black people were not voting, they were not voting. And then once they all actually voted, because people were helping them get registered and all of that, then it turned to a blue state. And I feel like that's what can help us more, honestly, is like just bringing awareness, going into those communities where people are just like, maybe not voting. They think, oh, there's nothing I can do, and showing them like we can do something if we just like stand up and unite together. In the chat, it says at the Walmart in Everett, they do lock up like nail clippers and stuff like that as well. Katrina said food deserts. I read an article on food deserts in New York, specifically how it was exploited by companies like the dollar store. I realized how communities near Mariner have been affected by this as well. And that really put it into perspective for me how close to home problems like this are. And then Araceli said, yes, Chicago is one of the biggest food deserts in the US. And that's what we all got to keep in mind too, is like, this happens in our own backyards. Like, it's not just some distant problem, it's affecting us everywhere nearby as well. Sierra?
Hi, thank you. I wanted to talk on, I guess, food stores and like grocery stores that are healthy. So for me, I'm from South Florida, I'm from Miami, and I live in like a white area, but my grandmother, she lives in a predominantly Black area. And it was a really big thing when they put a Whole Foods, because like they were like, there's more McDonald's than there are grocery stores. There's more like liquor stores, like somebody else was saying, than like literal places to eat. So they brought a Whole Foods in and it was really awesome. But then I literally want to say like a month or two later, people were upset because the Whole Foods brought a influx of white people, because the Whole Foods was economically priced as well, because that was a big thing. They didn't want to have a Whole Foods in quote unquote the ghetto or whatever, and then, you know, not have it thrive. So people were like, well, like if you make it economically like priced, you know, for like where it is, then like we'll buy. So like that was a really big like benefit at first. And then as soon as the Whole Foods came, it brought honestly like the white people. And with that, it started driving up a lot of other businesses, like the price for things like that. And it really literally created gentrification. And I think that's like something also to be said about how like healthy, like literal health and healthy foods are rooted in elitism and still racism, because it's like, okay, we solved that problem. Like we have food, like we gave you guys, you know, what you wanted, here you go. And then that just literally started gentrification. And like, I remember like the strip mall that the Whole Foods was in at first was next to like a Dollar Tree, a Sbarro, a Bravo, which is like, there were a lot of like Latinx and Black like local businesses in that strip mall, and a lot of like butcher, like meat shops and stuff like that, which was like super great. And they were again cheap. And then after that, like all those stores got bought out, and it like there was like a Sephora there now, and an Ulta, a spa, and I think a Trader Joe's also in there. And it's like now it's basically exclusively serving a white community, and like the prices are being driven up. So I feel like it's like very hard to like fight for something, especially when it comes to food, and then get it, and then still have a system kind of against you, because you know it brings an influx of white people looking for cheaper food out of their community and into yours, and the businesses pick up on that, and then they start to try to serve that community, and then it again makes it, you know, exclusive and impossible for people of color to access these things that are in their neighborhoods.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad that you brought up that point, because that's actually something like I knew about gentrification, obviously, and that whole process, but I didn't think about how like trying to even make the foods more affordable for communities of color and poorer communities would like turn into like this cycle that's still somehow against us. Like it's just like, fuck, can we ever win? Like, can we ever win? I really thank you for bringing that point up, because that just taught me something. Araceli, did you have any last words on your point?
Oh, I wanted to say thank you for bringing that point up too. I didn't even think about that. Never thought about that. But yeah, like a lot of businesses won't show up because they just think the ghetto's too ghetto type of thing. Like they're gonna think you're gonna steal. They're gonna think they can't find workers, and then then gentrification happens and it sucks. But yeah, thank you guys. I enjoyed hearing your guys' perspectives.
Yes. Anybody else have any last thoughts on Araceli's point? Victor?
Hi, so I don't usually talk on here, so my bad if I sound stupid. But the gentrification part, it's not just like, it just doesn't happen domestically, it also happens abroad. So in Mexico, you see all these American white people flooding into the US for cheaper goods, cheaper rent. And then you hear about these stories like in Tijuana, that's at the border. I think it's the southern of California, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they literally work in the US and then go to work in Tijuana. No, they live in Tijuana and commute back to the US just because of the rent. And then that drives the prices all the way high, which doesn't allow local native born people to be able to afford to live there. So that was a really good point to bring up, because that happens in countries where it is literally all people of color, literally native born people in the UN in Mexico. And yeah, that was a really good point to bring up, because I wanted to bring that up as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's definitely important to think about these issues abroad as well, because like the more I'm learning in like my major, because I'm a political science major, I'm seeing just like how this isn't just like a domestic issue. This is an international issue. Like through our international systems, like the UN and like all these other formats that we have out there, these type of issues are real internationally too, basically. Like they're affecting communities of color all over the world. Like our poorest nations are communities of color a lot of the time. And like, so yeah, I think it's definitely important to think about this, not just at a domestic scale, but an international scale, because our international systems are still based on like colonization. And like, it's just crazy to think about. Like, I'm so surprised that we have to have these arguments on if like systemic racism is real, when things like this, like if you just honestly educated yourself on these issues at all, like a little bit, then you would see like there's no question it is. It's honestly people that don't see these a lot of the time, these problems. I feel like it's an issue of just education, because all the professors I've met so far, you know, they're not allowed to blatantly say like, oh, I believe this or that. But all of my professors at this like whitewashed ass school, even, who educate themselves a little bit, see these issues and bring them up, because at the end of the day, it's not just about like, oh, I believe this and you believe that. It's facts, like facts, factual information that we're not equal. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, thank you very much. Any other last points before we get to our last speaker? No. Okay, so then we have Victor speaking on immigration.
Hello guys, how are you guys doing today? Let me pull this up real quick. Okay, give me 1 second.
And I just want to say thank you so much, Victor and Araceli, for speaking, because I know you guys aren't normal speakers and it's probably nerve-wracking, but like it means a lot, because I really wanted your guys' perspective. You know, like I said, I think it's important we unite on these issues, because our community's been done dirty for too long. Like we need to be able to vent and talk about ways that we can like unite and make change, you know?
Yeah. Gosh, I'm so sorry. Hold on. I'm trying to be able to read this while looking at you guys. Okay. Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay, well, hello guys. My name is Victor. I'm used to be a close friend of Rainey's back in high school, but you know, we went our separate ways. She goes to Eastern, I here in Everett. I'm glad to be able to come here and share my experience as a first generation Mexican American born into a household of mixed status here in the US. My background and my family, my parents were born in Mexico. They came to the US in like the late 80s, early 90s. And then my grandpa was also a worker in the US back in like the 1940s, between 1960s. And today we'll be talking about a part about a history that we were really taught in the American public school system. This part of history has a lot to do with how Mexicans and other Latinos were targeted and exploited over the course of history here in the United States, which still continues to this day. And what I'll be talking about today is the Bracero program. It was specifically created during the labor shortage of agricultural work in the United States due to World War II, where Mexican men were able to temporarily come to the US and work in these jobs. This had happened because of the internment camps put in place to keep Japanese Americans away from the public after the bombing of Pearl Harbor in the 1940s. And because of this, Japanese Americans played a huge role in agricultural work, which caused production to slow down in the United States. This would then lead into the creation of the Bracero program. So in this program, the United States incentivized decent pay and decent working conditions to the Braceros when that really wasn't the case for them at all. This led to the temporary and cheap labor of millions of Mexicans over the span of 22 years, which helped the US economy at the time. And so when I brought up that the conditions weren't really that well, I really wanted to bring this interview. I wanted to basically just read it to you guys to like give you a perspective of how bad they were treated here. Sorry, that was a lot of talking. I'm trying to breathe. Okay. So this is Mr. Albert de Luera Escobar. He was a former bracero, and then they were translating for him during this interview. Well, it's because so a woman conducting an interview with 65-year-old Alberto de Luera Escobar asked him why he mentioned being treated like a slave. And then here he goes, well, it's because he had to work very hard. They didn't give you a chance to rest, and they had you working in the fields picking vegetables and lettuce heads hunched over all day, 10 hours a day working bent over. The food they give you wasn't too good either. Imagine the camp of 7,000 to 10,000 people giving them food to eat on long tables like this. And I'm pretty sure they they gave you a visual of how the tables were. And then at 2 or 3 in the morning, you would have to get in line to go eat, because if you woke up late, you have to go off to work without eating. And then here goes 80-year-old Chon Tomlin employed braceros like Escobar on his farm in New Mexico. One of his main worries was being left without anyone to pick the crops. And so now we're going to be talking about the employer. Some of them would get homesick or didn't like, and they wanted to go home right away once you got them to work. You could always tell when they were about ready to leave you, and that is they would start buying clothes to take home. They always like these blue suitcases, kind of like a little trunk, and they usually all would leave. If you had 15 or 10, they'd all leave. They're strange that way. That's one of the things you have with them. They like to work in a group and stay in a group. And so that was basically what. Oh, this is another one. Miss Cario Johnson. We were picking tomatoes. I had a brother who just hated. I remember him just saying, I hate this, and he started throwing him and my older brother. They started throwing tomatoes at each other. All I could think was we are in trouble. And then somebody hit me with a tomato, and that's it. I got into it. Just a typical child play. The Mexican government didn't want to allow the braceros to be placed into the states that were discriminative. Unfortunately, they did still face the issues of racism and xenophobia in the United States. They were part of the groups that were discriminated against during the Jim Crow era. This meant that because they were Mexican or of Mexican descent, they were targeted because of the country that they came from, the color of their skin, or the way that they spoke. This country only saw and currently sees Mexicans and other Latinos as only good for their labor, and not for the sake of them wanting to find better jobs and better pay to suffice the needs of their family and or themselves. This is still currently going on in the United States, where the labor of migrant workers is still being exploited. They're being paid way less than they deserve. In June of 2021, these workers were transported to farms in Georgia, where they were being extremely exploited. They were only working $225 for 15 days of work and 12-hour days, which is nothing compared to a full-time minimum wage worker of $725. It is infuriating to see news reports like this when in 2020, these workers were labeled essential for their labor. 2 years have passed and lawmakers, specifically Republicans, were talking down on immigrant workers when their capitalist economy feeds off of the cheap labor that these workers produce. They will continue to fight against migrant farm workers and any other documented worker from obtaining citizenship in this country, because they know that if they were to be naturalized in the United States, they'd be voted out immediately. This inequality between labor and distribution of profits is what keeps failing our people. I don't think the system that was built off of exploitation will help them. It crushes them and further prevents them from fighting back by preventing such measures as obtaining citizen status in this country. And that's it.
Thank you so much. As you're like reading it, I'm just like snapping, because I'm just like, it just proves our point that this nation is built on the backs of people of color, especially Latinx community. Like you said, we're doing labor for way cheaper than they deserve. And that's happened to the Black community as well, where it's just like, we're building this nation and this system that you guys profit off of so much, and yet we have the lowest status in society. Like, make it make sense. It doesn't. So thank you. You educated me hella, because I did not know any of that. And it just shows me even more so now that like this is happening to both of our communities, and it's still happening today. You know, it's still relevant. So yeah, Araceli, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was gonna say good job, Victor, but I wanted to add to your point about the Bracero program. So I'm actually taking a class right now about like Latino history, and I kind of wanted, and there's still a lot of immigrants today, like people coming from Mexico just to work here in the US, but they are getting exploited, but the living conditions are horrible. Like it'll be like one small, like let's say like a 2-bedroom like apartment almost, where there will be like 16 workers and living in that like apartment cabin thing, and then like there'll only be like one toilet, and it's just like, it's so sad, and they're just working all day, and then they have to come home to like 15 other people in one toilet. And I wanted to show some pictures of what my teacher kind of shared with me about some of the cabins that they used to like live in. So this is one of the cabins that were built in like the 1990s, and inside this is where like a family of like farm workers would stay, and this is what it looked like. It's so tiny. there's some more pictures. I don't know. It's just like they're picking America's food and they get treated like shit and like live in these type of things. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it just shows how inhumane America really is. Like, I'm sorry, all of our principles that we claim to go by are bullshit because it's not equal for everybody. It's not for every person. It's not like for all of society. It's only for certain people. And that's with hella things. And it's just really unfortunate that we can claim to be so progressive and like this and that, when in reality, it's like we're only helping who we want to help and leaving everybody else out. And it's, I don't know, it's just crazy to me that they can treat the people that built this economy and this world like the shittiest out of anybody, you know. Giselle.
Yeah, well, Victor, you did so great. I enjoyed listening to all that information. I personally don't know much about like labor exploitation and the farmers work, but I do specifically remember this one point. So I am taking currently this like race and education and ethnicity class for like American studies or American ethnic studies. And so my professor has been trying to like advocate for like just ethnic studies as a whole, because like the way we've been taught is completely wrong. And they're, anyways, she was basically talking about how I don't know if you guys were ever like taught like any type of history besides, you know, white American history. But one of the key points that like when they did go over something like, let's say Latino history, they only ever really talked about like Cesar Chavez, which was like a hero in a sense, but we come to find out he was actually very problematic. But he was advocating for farmers, like labor workers or something along those lines. And I remember her specifically saying, which I didn't know, but that was completely wrong. He was actually completely against anything that what we would be for today. For example, like he would be definitely be his values aligned with that of Trump's, and that of like only letting legal immigrants come and work. And he was only advocating for legal workers, but he was actually completely against like illegal immigrants coming and working, even though they were part of the farmers and they were part of the, you know, workers that were being treated in a bad manner. And so he was only really advocating for those that were legal. And so that was a very big problem that, you know, has come to light now, and that people are starting to realize. Because I remember like in some of my classes, like they were like, oh, you guys should love him, like he was like, you know, this big hero for everyone and advocated for farmers. Yes, but he only advocated for those who were legal in the States. And I think he was overshadowing what happens to all workers, not just the ones that are quote unquote legal in the States. So that was just a point that like she brought up that like it kind of resided with me today, because I remember in my high school, like we had like Cesar Chavez's like grandson come and talk or something. But yeah.
Yes, you just educated the fuck out of me once again, because I had no clue. The only education I really had on like Latinx problems was the Cesar Chavez videos that we watched in Chamberlain's class. And like I remember it being a big ass deal when his grandson was coming to speak and everything. I'm just mind blown. It just shows once again another point of relation to the Black community, because they try to omit our history so much, only teach us certain things, and most of the things aren't even relevant. Like this just proves even more so. I feel like, in my opinion, there should be like, so I guess Mariners finally put like a ethics or civics type of class in, which is fine, but that just shows you have to have the right people teaching it. Honestly, I don't think people that are not Latinx should be teaching Latinx history. And I don't think people that are not Black should be teaching Black history, because a lot of the time it's like you can't be as accurate, you know what I'm saying? Because like you just don't know like how we know, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, thank you guys so much for bringing that up, for real. Tatiana.
Yeah, a few different points if I can, because I should start taking notes because I have the mental capacity of a goldfish. But going off of what Araceli, sorry if I said that wrong, But going off those pictures of where the farmers are living, or that literally is barely a step up from a slave home. Like, and that was made in the 90s. Like, weren't we supposed to be all past that at that point?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little concerning. But also when Rainey said all the values that America is built on and what we, yeah, no, because literally with it's not the national anthem, that the flag, the I don't even remember what you call it. I stopped saying it so long ago.
The Pledge of Allegiance.
The Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah.
Period. Fuck the Pledge of Allegiance.
Bro, I stopped saying that shit so long ago, but literally the last line is like, for liberty and justice for all. And it's like, who's this for all we're talking about? Because I don't know when that pledge was made, but I'm gonna guess that for all probably is just the white people, because and I don't know if they make students still say it, because I know a lot of my teachers like didn't really care if we said it or not. A lot of them did, like you at least had to stand. But I mean, it's just like, just look at the news, literally just search anything up and you will see what justice is for all and who that justice really is for. Because it's definitely not for us, like at all. And then also for Mariner now having an ethics class or whatever, I do agree that it, like, cultural classes shouldn't be taught by non-cultured people, just because it's like, you just don't understand. Like, it's a cultural thing. Like, you just don't understand the culture of it. And that's fine. Like, if you're, if you just weren't born in the culture, like, it is what it is. But don't sit here and try to like teach it. Because I had a Spanish teacher she was white, like she was just straight up white. And she definitely knew Spanish. Like, she knew what the fuck she was like teaching. But I always felt so weird because I was like, I get Spanish, but it's just like, you don't know, like, proper Spanish. You don't know the Spanish that everyone else is speaking in school. So, I mean, it was just like that every day in her class. Like, I just felt so weird being there. And like back then, I wasn't really even thinking of like race and all of that as I do now. But I just felt so uncomfortable just going to her class, this red-haired, very pale woman just teaching Spanish. Like, it just really rubbed me the wrong way. And I don't know what movie it was. And I want to say, I don't know what, but Denzel Washington and Viola Davis were in a movie at some point in time. And Denzel was asked why that movie needed to have a Black director instead of a white one. And he literally was like, it's the culture. It's like, you can sit here and you can write about it and you can, do these things, but it's just like, he said, we know what a hot comb smells like on a Sunday morning, like a lot of white people are not going to know what that smells like. They're not going to know that burning feeling or when your ear gets touched or the blister, like they're not going to know all that, it's just, yeah, I agree. I don't know who was teaching it. I didn't even know that was a thing. I haven't been at Mariner in so long, but I really hope that they are just being progressive and not trying to just make it look like, oh, we have an ethics class now, or we have an LGBTQ club now. Like, I really hope they're actually doing what they should be doing,
Yes, thank you so much. And I definitely agree. Like I said, Chamberlain, she was a great teacher. She really tried to like show the culture, but at the end of the day, it's not the same as if a Hispanic person was trying to show the culture, like, you can do a great job. You can learn it like the back of your hand, but it's still not going to be the same at the end of the day. Cause yeah, we have the culture, we experience these things differently than like they've never had to experience certain things, in the chat, it says those immigrant homes, quotation marks, were chilling because they look exactly like slave quarters. And that's exactly what came to my mind too when she showed those pictures. They do look exactly like slave quarters. Katrina said she does the announcements at school and has to say the Pledge of Allegiance every day. I've literally had staff members ask me to say it faster so that they don't have to deal with their awkward classroom being silent and sitting with only the teacher standing because they're still required to. That's mind-blowing to me. I didn't know anybody was still required to say the freaking pledge. Like, I've been freaking not saying the pledge for as probably my whole high school, like my whole high school years when I got educated on it and just realized, why am I standing here saying some bullshit that doesn't even hold true for my community, you know? So yeah, that's really surprising to me. And I know my mom had told me in the past that she used to have to say the pledge. Like, it was not an option back then to like sit down. I've had teachers at Mariner too, like subs that have filled in, get offended that I sat down during it and didn't say anything. And it's always like a patriotic type of argument, but I'm like, honestly, I'm not going to stand for a flag that has like marginalized my community. I'm not going to stand for this pledge that doesn't apply to my community, you know. It just doesn't make sense. At the end of the day, don't make sense. So yeah, thank you guys. Sierra, did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, really quick. Two things. The first is about the pledge. Honestly, like, I think it's actually crazy that like we even still say it, because when the pledge and like the national anthem were written, Black people weren't considered whole people. Like, they were, again, 3/5 of a person. So I think it's absolutely BS that like they even expect Black people to respect the pledge or the you know, the national anthem or anything like that, because that's crazy. When it was written, you literally were not talking about my community. You were not talking about it. So yeah, there's that. And then I wanted to ask you guys, your high school where you had Cesar Chavez's grandson come and talk, was it a white high school, or was it pretty diverse?
It was a very diverse high school, I would say, right? Mariner was very diverse. So yeah, I was going to argue also that a lot of the students weren't aware of the problematic, like, you know, ideals that Cesar Chavez did had. So a lot of us actually, you know, enjoyed the presentation that he did. Everyone did, because that's what our high school was teaching us. But I learned it now that I'm in college, from an ethnics teacher, or a professor, that, you know, something that I didn't know. So it does tie back to it matters who's teaching these curriculums. And I was gonna go on a whole tangent about this, but you can finish.
No, you're fine. My last thing is like, I went to school in Miami, South Florida, and like we did not even talk a little bit about, you know, immigrant experiences or Latinx people at all. And I think that's crazy, because like I'm from Miami. Like, that's insane. But another thing is, it's like when I do hear about people learning these things, it's like it's in a community, like it's a high school, or they're teaching a community about themselves almost, where it's like, no, this would be beneficial to a white high school. This would be beneficial to a white college. And y'all are uncomfortable, you know, teaching these histories, but like, you know, for a Latinx high school or a Black, you know, high school, you're like, oh, like we're gonna do this whole big thing for like Black History Month, or we're gonna do this whole big thing about immigration and stuff. Like, obviously, yes, it's good to see those things be taught about your community, but like, I feel like sometimes it's almost a little pointless, because it's like, teach this to the white kids. Like, I don't need this. Like, you know, and I feel like especially in higher education, when you guys were talking about your Spanish teacher was teaching Spanish and it wasn't, you know, Latinx or Spanish at all. I think it's the same with higher education. Like, I had a African American studies class taught by a white woman. I stayed in that class for 2 days and I was like, goodbye, because that's ridiculous. I think like you shouldn't be able, like you guys were saying, to speak on it. But then it's like, colleges, I feel like, are like, well, you asked for those classes, so we're giving them to you. Like, what are you upset about now? You know? And I still also think it's scary too, because, you know, what's going on in this country with the whole Don't Say Gay bill and all that. It's like, and like, you know, the states who have critical race theory being illegal to be taught, it's like, how do you win? Like, how do you educate, literally, how do you educate people who are not from our communities, who aren't from communities of color, about histories, about them, without it literally turning into being illegal, or without it being so skewed and like whitewashed that it's comfortable for them?
Yes, thank you so much. I definitely agree. Like, from a political aspect of your argument, Sierra, like we have this issue a lot because a lot of communities of color are like in a different area basically than like white communities. And the issue with that is like a lot of the policy that's voted on is not going to be like diverse in that white community because there's not a lot of people of color that live there, but people of color don't want to live in those white communities because they're not for them. So once again, it's like a cycle. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And Giselle, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so back to just the, why does this keep going? Okay. Back to the whole like what's being taught, and this ties back again to what Victor was saying with immigration. Like it really how do I say this? So like I said, I'm pre-nursing, so all my classes are just science-based, right? So okay. But this is what I did appreciate about my university, that you do have to take a couple diversity classes, and because I'm so involved in like medicine, you wouldn't like I really wasn't educated on a lot of things. A lot of things I was learning like online from people, what people were saying, or like in this class. So this class was the first structured class that I've had that had to do anything with ethnic studies. So I've learned a lot in just the last like 7 weeks that I've been in school. So my professor, she's indigenous Mexican, along those lines is how she identifies. So she actually did bring up critical race theory as well. That's one of the curriculums that we've been very focused on lately. And with ethnic studies, it and trying to reform how it's being taught and how everything, and with high schools now wanting to introduce these courses, it's incredibly, it's crucial that who's teaching it is teaching from an unbiased standing, because if it's a white male or female professor or teacher or whatever they may be that they're gonna put their opinions into it, and they're not gonna be teaching it in the correct manner. They don't understand what they're saying or what they're doing, because they've never like experienced things firsthand with it. And another thing, with my professor having as much knowledge as she does, she's continuing to learn. And so she's taught all of us, because what we found in just that classroom that we had of 40 of us, none of us knew anything up until taking that course. And these are people that their majors are in ethnic studies, and they still were never taught this up until they took that course. So it's very important that what we're learning about history is accurate and it's not biased, because again, what I learned in high school, the little bit that I learned that wasn't a lot, because I don't get that they didn't want to teach me that. It was inaccurate and it was wrong, and the problems were not brought to light, and it took a lot of like finding out on my own, which which is another disparity that we're facing, is that people of color and students of color that want to further their education, they already know these things. We already know our experiences and our cultures and our history, because we had to figure that out on our own. It was never taught to us. We didn't get that privilege that the white people get, and to them it's brand new. To them, they're like, oh my goodness, like, you guys went through this. Of course we went through it. We figured it out when we were younger, and it's still a problem that we still have to face today. But what are you going to do about it? We're the only ones advocating for ourselves, because our teaching staff isn't even advocating for it, because all they care about is getting their salary at the end of the month and making sure that they're meeting the state requirements. That's all really the teachers do care about. They don't care about reforming how an education is being taught to a student of color. They just want to make sure they're getting paid at the end of the day. So that's a problem with the education system, because that's the course that I am taking. It's race and ethnicity in the education system in America. So, and this goes with every culture too. It doesn't just have to be Latino or Latina community. It could, we've seen it with the Asian community, the Black community, Native Americans or indigenous, people, just anyone really, that they're going through this. So it's really just any person of color.
Yes, thank you so much. I completely agree with everything you stated. Honestly, yes, like you said, it goes for both of our communities, and it's really sad that we have to wait till we get to college to learn a lot of things, because like you said, we do have to go out of our way just to get a basic understanding of our history. And then a lot of the times it's hard to even do that because a lot of it's so inaccurate, you know. My aunt said that's why it's important to have people of color in positions to teach and lead, but it's hard to come by, which I wanted to say one point on. My old teacher, Marquardt, like we talk here still, or here and there still, and she had mentioned that they are trying now with all this realization that's been going on to find like more teachers of color and stuff like that, but it's sparse. Like there's not a lot of people of color applying to be teachers. So one of the solutions maybe that we could think of right now in the moment is like going into these fields that we want to see change in, you know, and pushing for that change. We've always had to advocate for ourselves, you know, and going into these fields, we can start advocating and like giving voice to everyone that does experience these things, because we're a part of the community too, you know, like we can't just be ignored. So yes, thank you so much. Victor?
I was gonna go off of what Sierra said about not hearing about like immigration like in Florida, because there's like a small part of history that is not really taught in schools, mostly because of like a part of it that the US doesn't really want to bring up, and that's socialism. And so, but in Cuba, there was I guess they call it a dictator. He was Fidel Castro. And so he basically instated socialism and basically proposed great these great proposals, I guess, like legislation, you could say. And so this basically took away like, basically to do this, they had to take away from like white people, which they, you know, like anywhere in the world, once you take away things from white people, they basically go fucking crazy, you know what I mean? And so basically white Cubans were taken away of their like holds on like slaves, or I guess their farms and stuff, because I guess socialism was more like sharing between like the community, you know what I mean? And so basically the Cubans come to the US and basically fled into Miami, or like I guess you say Florida, my bad. I don't know my geography. And so and so they fled into Florida, and basically they created this huge voter base for the US at the time, in which favors in capitalism. And so basically what you see is like this change in like dynamic over like where things are teached and like shown in schools. And so but most of like history and like, I guess you could say immigration happens a lot more like on the West Coast, mostly because it was like mostly part of like Mexico's history. Like we sold that land from them, America did. And so you'll see different dynamics in teaching in like different parts of the US, mostly because of like migration from different countries, different crises that happen around the world, which basically fled into the US. And that's why it's like really diverse in teaching. And that's just a good insight on that.
Thank you so much. Once again, had no clue. So I'm really glad for the Zoom, honestly, because I'm just like, I'm learning a lot this Zoom. Normally it's like, I feel like, you know, I know a lot of what we're talking about because it's always on Black issues, but just hearing your perspective and like all the voices that have been talking today has really shown me like we can relate on so much more than I even thought, and also like how uneducated I was on Latinx issues, and how much it's like lacking. The teaching is lacking just as much as Black history, if not more, honestly, in our school system. Like at least we get our little MLK and all that for a week, but y'all, we don't really learn anything about Mexican history or anything like that. So yeah, thank you guys so much. Keon actually had something to say.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say, I was watching a documentary in my psychology class, and it was talking about how for this group of Hawaiians, like when the white people came, pretty much they would force them into schools, and just like to Native Americans, they did it too, where they would force them into schools and like force them to like only speak English, and like if they were like taking part in any like ritual or tradition from like their origins, they would get punished. So pretty much it ended up where they forced these people to like forget their tongue and like all their culture, and like it happened to like so many cultures. So I feel like that's still like part of the issue like today, is like the system still like kind of built on that to like kind of replace our history with like what they want us to, you know, believe pretty much. Yeah.
Thank you so much. A really good point, and I did want to bring that up too, but I didn't. So I'm glad you brought it up, Keon. It's like they're trying to make us lose our identity a lot of the time, and so I think that's why it's even more important to have these discussions and like have this education in our schools, because we're already struggling with our identity being born a person of color, like in a society that doesn't want us really, and then like even our school system, as we all have been talking about now, is participating in that, you know? So yeah, thank you so much. Tatiana?
Hi. Going back to when Sierra had just literally briefly brought up critical race theory, that instantly made me think of, and I just had to look it up because my mom, she always reads like news articles or whatever, and she very briefly brought up the fact that this mother, who I guess is in Virginia, has a biracial son. She's white and he's half black, half white, and she is suing the school board because her son was taught critical race theory in school, and now she puts it, everything to him now is like racist or deemed racist, or it's, it's this or that. And like she said, her son wasn't like that before, and now she's suing because of whatever reason, honestly. And my mom was like, she's like, well, is he just now probably realizing that things actually are racist in America? Like, I don't know how the case is going. And I'm really, because I totally even forgot about it until literally she said that. But I just thought that was so wild, because critical race theory is so important. Like, we really don't get, like, yeah, our MLK Day or, whatever little things here and there, but we really don't get taught what we actually need to be taught. And if they're going to be teaching actual, things that need to be taught, I mean, it's not that child's fault. It's not the school's fault. It's not the child's fault that his eyes were opened up to what America is and the way we were actually built. Like, America literally was not built by white people. It was built for white people, but it was not built by them. Like, it was built by my ancestors, y'all's ancestors. Like, we made this bitch up in here, and they're trying to sit here and claim it as their own. And I just thought that was crazy. I just had to bring that up because, like, she's literally suing an entire school board because her son is now thinking everything is racist, which, this is kind of off topic, but it brings me back to what I had said last Zoom of, like, don't have children with colored people if you're not going to sit here and actually educate yourself on what your child is going to go through, and then also just who you're being with. Like, don't lay down with just anybody. Like, that just is stupid. Like, don't just sit here and lay down with a Mexican man because you want a spicy looking child. Like, no, like, actually understand what's going to happen when that child comes into this world, into this country that has never been made for them. And it's just like, oof. It irks my soul. It irks my whole soul when I see things like this, because, like, why are you that upset about it? I don't get it. It just doesn't make sense to me, and I just wish we could change those things.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. A few points popped up into my head when everyone was speaking. One of them being just going back to the point on what's it called? Like how we feel like more diverse communities get that more diverse education, even though it should really go to like less diverse communities. With the thing I was saying about like politically advocating and stuff, I feel like it's important also for the people that are built for it, because some people are tired of having these conversations. They've had to have them their whole lives, and if that's not in your capacity as a person of color to go out and like try to spread awareness all the time and educate people, that's totally understandable. There's days I feel like that too, being on this campus. But for the people that do feel like they can do that, I think it's important that we do go and make ourselves uncomfortable. I mean, we always uncomfortable being people of color, but going to those communities and trying to like spread that awareness, because it can make a difference like people do change their mindsets once they're more educated. Some people never will, and you just gotta be like, fuck them. But like other people, they do, you know? And on your point, Tatiana, when you were saying like how people are talking about like, or how he was saying things are all about race and stuff now, I hear that a lot, you know, why does it always have to be about race? Why are you so political? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, because this world is surrounded, or this world is built on these racist things, you know what I'm saying? Everything is about race, honestly, in America. And my whole life is political, being a person of color. Like, so I'm sorry if a lot of the time I make things about race or about politics, it's because that's the way it is, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up too. Giselle?
Yeah, back to what Tatiana, is that how you pronounce it? Okay. Back to what you were saying about critical race theory. Again, really like this course that I've been taking, but you know, we did do a discussion kind of why, you know, the anti-critical race theory supporters or whatever and all that stuff. And, you know, a lot of them you know, they have a completely wrong idea of what even critical race theory is, because they just assume it's anti-white, anti-American, anti-everything. But, you know, it's giving us back what, you know, we were supposed to be taught originally. But anyways, like, it just goes to show that because they're ignorant, you know, it's like this cycle. Like, they're ignorant because of what they think it is, because they won't take time to educate themselves on what it really is about, and then what it can do to, you know, support, you know, others. So that was like this whole thing. And then back to what I think a point that Keon said about the languages that are being taken away. I know a lot of it does happen in Texas, or happened in Texas, because of when they merged together, like a lot of people, you know, Mexicans, they were, you know, they were told and punished if they spoke Spanish in like the 60s or whatever. I'm not sure exactly what time, but around that time they like were like, if you're in school, you know, some of them would get punished physically. So, you know, they were told, do not speak Spanish. And that's why a lot of Mexican Americans, you know, they like 3 generations down, you know, they'll be shamed, like, why don't you speak Spanish? They're like, because my grandparents were told not to speak it, so we lost the language over the generations of times. That's why they identify themselves sometimes as Texans and not really Mexican American, because they don't identify that anymore as themselves as that anymore. And then this happens also like in other parts. So like, for example, like, you know, Guam is a US territory, and I learned this from my boyfriend, but you know, it's a territory part of the US, and their language has died out for I don't know how many decades, but you know, the Chamorro language was taken away from them, and they, you know, it's dead. A lot of them don't know how to speak Chamorro. My boyfriend does not know how to speak Chamorro that well. His parents understand it but may not be able to speak it, and then it's not unless the older generation that actually knows it. But you know, their time is going to come, and you know, no one knows how to, it's a dying language. So it happens everywhere, even in US territories that, you know, they want it so bad, you know, and they want to completely whitewash it because, you know, it's just so many things with it. But yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for bringing up that point. I always have like, I don't know. This is why I feel so connected. Like I said, I keep saying I feel so connected with like the Latinx community, because I feel like you guys have been marginalized like the same way, and a lot of the same ways that like the Black community has been. And it's like I hear that comment a lot too at my job. I have like this racist boss that I have reported and I'm dealing with, but she's been racist for years and still works there somehow. So I'm trying to like take action against her, but she's like told the Hispanic people like at our job, can you speak English? Like just straight up says stuff like that to them. And I'm just like, girl, they weren't even talking to you. Like, why do you care if they're talking to each other in their native language? You know, like, how does it affect you? And I hate the view that like, if you do like, you know, speak in your native language and stuff like that, you're somehow like less American. Like, no, America is a melting pot of cultures, you know, and that should be celebrated, not told, oh, you're in America, you should speak English. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, thank you. It's really sad that like, you know, the language a lot of the time is like, people are trying to erase that, you know, and same with like the culture. I feel like these points show even more why we have to make sure that it doesn't die, you know, we have to be the ones to like keep things going, you know. So yeah, thank you so much. Sierra.
I just wanted to say back to what Tatiana was saying about critical race theory and the mother suing the school because her half Black person of color child basically came into like realization and had like an awakening of like self about racism. I think that it's super important that we're even having like this discussion, because I feel like critical race theory and even just doing things like this, like when we were talking, everybody was saying how like, at least for me and like what you were saying, what you didn't know a lot about, you know, the Latinx community and like even these like points that we're bringing up in these topics. I think it's very important to even just talk about it. And I feel like it's like very saddening that like a lot of states and people who have children who are, you know, people of color, no matter what, even if they're half white, half whatever, like whether that's, you know, Black, Latinx, Asian, they're still a person of color. They're going to be seen as a person of color, that like they can potentially not even get to be taught about critical race theory and racism and how it affects them. And like, I feel like it's so sad because as a person of color, you come into realization about racism pretty early on. And I feel like when you don't, like, you're a lot more sad and like you just don't understand why the world is the way it is. And with critical race theory, I feel like it's really, really helpful. And like for me, like obviously, well, not obviously, you guys can't see, but I'm Black, I'm African American, or sorry, I'm Afro Caribbean and Black and African American, and I majored in African American studies in undergrad, and that taught me literally so much about Black people and, you know, the African diaspora that I literally did not know, even growing up as a Black person and, you know, going to school. And I think that it's just so saddening that like other people of color, kids of color, won't even get to get that education and understanding of like why, you know, the world treats them or why the United States specifically treats them differently. And I think that like having these discussions about it, even though we know we are like on the collegiate level, are still super important because, you know what I mean, there's literally gonna be kids who didn't get taught critical race theory and have no idea like what, you know, what that is.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that's so true. Like when you're educated on these issues and on your history and everything, it helps you kind of like find your voice more and find your identity more. Cause I felt very confused. Like I felt like I didn't fit in anywhere, especially being mixed. But when I started like, honestly at college is when I like gained more of a voice and I started realizing that a lot of things are not okay and that I have to speak up on those things. Yeah, that came with like a better understanding of myself and like a better understanding of like what's going on in my community. So I think it's really important to have these talks, no matter how uncomfortable they may be. It's like it's still an issue, you know, it has to be talked about because it's a fact of life and it affects a large portion of our population and we can't just act like it doesn't, you know. And just to maybe speak a little bit on like again your point, Sierra, too. My brother, he was like pissed as a child because he didn't like his skin color because all the students at his school would like tell him his people are slaves and like this and that, just all these negative things about like people with brown skin. And like if they were educated better, I feel like, and if we had these like talks earlier on, it wouldn't have been so hard for my brother because he would have had a better understanding of what it means to be a Black person. You know, it's something to be proud of. So yeah, I really thank you for bringing up that point. Victor?
I really wanted to go into the topic about language in the US. I know that being a child of immigrant parents, going to like elementary school, they would place you into these programs where you're just learning I guess a second language, but really you're just assimilating to just talk their primary language in the US. Because being born into a family where like everybody was at home all the time, you know, as a child you're always in school and it's really hard to like stay connected between both languages, which is why we have this thing called Spanglish, where you're just talking half English, half Spanish, half of the time. Well, most of the time, technically. And it's just crazy how, like, being in the US, if you think about history, like, being erased of your native language and assimilating into like American culture and just like going into that is just, it's really crazy how like it still happens today. It's just like we're more blunt. We're not technically blind to it, but in their eyes, like we're blind to it. You know what I mean?
Yes, thank you so much. Tatiana, you had something to add?
Not really, and this is kind of random, but for Giselle, did you say you were in a nursing program? Or
I'm pre-nursing. So I'm doing my prereqs at UW, and then I'll be applying to my major for my bachelor's of nursing.
okay. I was wondering, because I'm not a nurse, but is it similar? I know what a nurse is, and it's not a doctor, but they do help doctors. I was just wondering, because I saw on Facebook this anatomy diagram of like a Black woman, and they were like, the caption was like, this is, you know, obviously very helpful because we know what bruises and different things look like on white skin, but how are we supposed to tell the difference? Even if you have like a disease or anything like that, you can't really, it shows up different on colored skin. Like, I was just wondering, have you been taught anything for like colored people, or is it still just very white?
So I actually have not taken any, like, I'm not in nursing school, so I haven't taught me anything.
Okay.
However, I am in a CNA course, so that's a certified nursing assistant. And from what I've read so far, I'm still in the, program, so I still have to get my certification and test out. But from what we learned, and if you look in the textbook, because I've also like a big thing that I'm doing with nursing is advocacy for the health disparities in the Latina community, because it's a whole thing. We're discriminated against, and there's so many ideas that goes into like medicine and, like insurance and immigration status and, your everything that goes into healthcare, and the disparities of it. So it does correlate together. But when you look at the textbook and when you're being taught these things, even the mannequins are white, they're fair skinned, like everything is assuming the patient is, an average height, an average weight. We're not talking obesity. We're not talking about, someone who's very, very, skinny and underweight. We're talking about just the average. We're talking about the average, white female or male. And, that's one of the things that like we're being taught. And so I did see that something similar to that before, where like the textbook showed, I think I saw what you saw, but yeah, we're not being taught what we should be either. It goes into healthcare. It goes into every aspect of life, but it is evident in healthcare also.
I think it's just interesting because, and I've never been to college, unfortunately, and I'm like super interested in going now, literally just take like an Africana class or something. But at least the textbooks in high school are literally from like the 50s. And so like they don't get updated, or it costs too much, or literally whatever it is. So I was just wondering, because I'm wondering if I guess the textbooks in college are also super outdated and just from like the 1700s and whatever, because I mean, it's just like time evolves and different things happen. And like they have like pills now for HIV where you can go like undetected. You have to take it every day, but like that's a new thing. Like I'm sure that probably, it might be in, an updated article or whatever, but like in an actual like the 500-page like textbooks, from the 80s, it's probably not in there. And I was just thinking, like when you said you were in like, I guess pre-nursing, I was just like, I wonder if, because I thought of that diagram and then I was just like, have they been updated yet? Like it's 2022, Black people, do go to the hospital, and it is a thing. And that is very interesting that you bring up like insurance and stuff, because I didn't even think of that either. But yeah, just so many different things go into healthcare for colored people. And like that's a whole topic within itself. But yeah, I was just wondering.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at one of my like, one of my things, and I'm looking through it, and it's there because I know like I know CNAs can't do as much as a nurse, but I do know it depends also on the curriculum that they're being taught at each different nursing school. So I know UW has prided its nursing program. It's like the number one, I think, public nursing program in the United States. So, they do try to keep up with everything, but there's only so much they can cover because they don't really see it as something urgent. They want you to learn, like, as messed up as it sounds, they want you to learn like just what you're going to be tested on the NCLEX, which is the test you do to test out of the program and you can become a licensed nurse. And then what you learn is, the experience, the hands-on experience you're doing when you actually go into a hospital. So really all they do care about is if you're going to pass the test. And I know it's like very important for things, like if you're looking at moles or any form of skin cancer, because there are a lot of, diseases out there that will affect Black or like Latinx communities more than, a white person. So that's also very important. But that's like a whole separate subject. Like I could go into that. My whole like thing is about that. But yeah, it's everywhere. Honestly, race is everywhere. Like the disparities are everywhere you look, no matter what aspect of life, it's everywhere. And so it's important to, be aware of these things.
Yeah, we should have a talk on the healthcare system because that disproportionately affects both of our communities as well, I feel like. So yeah, thank you guys for bringing those points up. And Tatiana, for me, like at my university, the teachers get to choose what book we are required to read. So a lot of ours are up to date, are relevant, so I really appreciate that because a lot of them do tackle these issues, which is why I know some people are just not school people, but I do think even if you don't go into the major that you thought you were going to, college is beneficial just for that point where you gain so much more knowledge and perspectives and stuff like that, and you actually know what you're talking about, so you're not just adding into an argument that you have no clue what you're saying, I'm the type of person that I like to research everything before I speak on something. So this just really helps me argue better basically about these things that I care about, So yeah, I'm really glad we got so deep into the school system because it's relevant, like I said, for both of our communities. And thank you, Victor, so much for starting us off with your topic. Did you have any last words on that?
No, I do not.
All righty. If anybody wants to say any last thoughts, then we can do that. But otherwise, we can wrap it up. And thank you guys so much for coming. I learned so much the Zoom. I really think that the Zoom shows that we need to stick together, our two communities at least. I think all communities of color should, but especially our two communities, because honestly, with all the violence that's been happening towards the Black community, the people that are standing right by our side a lot of the times are the Latinx community. You know what I'm saying? You guys are just as loud as us on these issues that affect our communities, and I think the Black community should do the same for you guys because all these immigration issues, we really need to stick together and just advocate for each other, So thank you guys so much. I'm going to stop the recording.